Hello and welcome to another episode of Never Mind the Dam Busters, the podcast dedicated to all things Bomber Command, with me, Jane Gulliford-Lowes, and my co-host, James Jeffries. So today we thought we'd bring you up to speed with what we've been up to and also share some news. We've got a great selection of listeners' questions as well. These are absolutely brilliant questions. And thank you to those who've sent in their issues for discussion and debate. So I think it's fair to say that James and I have had a very busy few weeks. Well, I say busy. Part of it involved me being on holiday, but that's another issue. But of course, we have to talk about We Have Ways Fest because it was absolutely fantastic. Such a great weekend, wasn't it, James?
Oh, it was so good. I'm a bit gutted I had to leave a little bit early because I was also teaching in Cambridge at the time and I needed to head back. But wow, it was brilliant. And I've so many cool people there. And one of the highlights actually was having people say, oh, I love the pod, which was really cool. But yeah, some brilliant talks. And I especially like the RAF stuff that was there, obviously. But seeing the Spitfire there parked up was a nice little surprise.
Yeah, there was a lot more RAF stuff there this year and a lot more sort of RAF related talks as well, I thought. Bit short on Navy still. We need to work on that. But yeah,
that's true.
I've got some ideas for that for next year, so we'll see what happens. Yeah. It was great to see everybody and just the opportunity to chat to sort of like-minded people, but also to be able to chat to some really amazing historians as well is just fantastic.
Yeah. And some guests there as well. We had Sarah Lou giving her talk on the Lancaster, which was absolutely brilliant. Good. Dan Ellin, who's going to be coming back. Saw Dan. That was nice catching up with him. And also people like Woody, World War II TV. And your mine laying talk, I have to say, was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Is there anything you want to share about that at all?
Well, it was really hard to fit everything in because I only had like 25 minutes. Mine was the last talk on the Friday night at 8:00 when everyone was hammered, and it was just so hot that day as well. It was absolutely unbearable.
It was, yeah.
So thanks to everyone who turned up to come and see me ramble on about Arthur Harrison minelaying at 8:00 on the Friday night. So I really tried to just focus on the myths surrounding minelaying. So the idea that it was an easy job and that Harris was opposed to it, or that it was, just a waste of time or just a job that they did for the Navy. So I think I managed to sort of pique people's interest and stuff. But I did forget to mention about the book. I'm such a bad marketer. So my book on Bomber Command gardening operations and mine laying, Invisible Campaign, is going to press in middle of October, and I forgot to mention it. But anyway, we're going to be doing an episode all about that later on, close to that time.
Absolutely,
There we go. Yeah.
And
you talked about Overlord and Bomber Command, and that was one of the best talks I attended. Now, I'm not just saying that because it's you, and I know I'm massively biased, but it was really good. Just the detail and just the great overview that you gave, and sort of linking everything back to sort of much earlier than the war. It was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah. It built on sort of when we did our podcast on it, but saying that building up the wider context, as you say, that the build up to it going slightly further back, but also the legacy of it. And it wasn't just about bombing the beaches. It was deception plans. It was a transportation plan. It was supporting the army. I think there needs to be a bit of a deeper dive on it personally, which could be another project. I give myself more work, aren't I?
I think somebody should write a book about that. Yeah. And I think that somebody should be.
But also the thing that I really enjoy, and this is the main thing really of my thesis and why I'm doing it, is the evolution of the memory of these events and why some things are remembered more than others. And I think Bomber Command Overlord, you think that would be the thing that everybody would want to talk about. But it's not.
Yeah.
No. And that's what I kind of want to say, like, hey, this was really important. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the same with the mine laying? I mean, they were doing that for like 5 years and nobody ever mentions it. So, and it was massively important and got massive results as well in terms of disruption, sort of diversion of resources and numbers of ships sunk. It was absolutely massive. So anyway, you've got some other exciting news as well, haven't you?
I do, yes. I've been sitting on this for a good number of months, but spoke to Barnthorne Publishing, who want me to write a book on the Augsburg Raid, Operation Margin, and I'm absolutely buzzing. I've been wanting to tell people for ages, and it's been like, no, save it, and then it was like, I'm giving a talk at Weird Ways, just, go on then. It felt so good. But yeah, I mean, anyone who follows me on Twitter or has spoken to me knows about this.
One of the first pieces of work I ever saw you do, and I think it must have been during COVID, when everyone was doing online lectures and stuff. It was a talk that you did on the Augsburg Raid. And I was like, wow, I didn't know anything about this. Yeah, it's
thank you.
Such an interesting subject.
That was history indoors. Right. The first one I did was on my dissertation on Bomber Commando, the Battle of Britain. I got asked to do a second talk, and straight away I knew it was either going to be Augsburg or the Nuremberg Raid, because they're just ones that I've always found absolutely fascinating. There's loads of others, but the Augsburg Raid, I think it comes from watching Jack Curry's documentary growing up. So this is going back. My dad recorded on a VHS. It was a Bomber Command VHS. So it had Bomber Harris with John Thor. It had The Forgotten Bomber about the Bristol Blenheim, and then it had Jack Curry's documentary of the Augsburg Raid. You can see how this set me up for what I'm studying now. And yeah, I mean, it's when my familiarity really with Bomber Command was of the Dam Busters, the night raids and such like. And then all of a sudden there was this absolutely crazy raid in daylight, low level, deep into Bavaria over Augsburg with the Battle of the Atlantic going on. And I was just absolutely hooked and going, this is fascinating. And the thing is, you've had Jack Curry's book, which is 1987, which is still a brilliant read. And you've had a couple of other sort of smaller pamphlet-y books, but you've not really had a deeper dive. And there's been a lot of things that have come out since then. And I've been chatting to a couple of quite exciting people about it as well. And there's just so much more to say. I know, look at me go, honestly. But yeah, it's so exciting because I am very passionate about it. Yeah, I'm always coming up with ideas. I've always wanted to do something on the Augsburg Raid. So when I gave that talk, and again, some of the things that I said in the talk, I've changed my mind slightly about.
Oh,
but that's the nature of research, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great though that everyone's got their own little niche with Bomber Command, haven't they? Because it's such a massive subject. There's sort of room for people to go down so many different rabbit holes and alleyways and pursue their own particular field of research. And there's still new stuff to be talked about all the time, as you and I have both discovered with our own research.
It is. There is so much to talk about. And, we've got a whole podcast dedicated to it. And there's still, we've got our little spreadsheet, haven't we? There's still, we could talk about this and talk about this raid and talk about this perspective. It's wonderful. But I believe you've been in Norway again.
No, I haven't been in Norway. I was in Herefordshire.
That was Norway?
No. I was writing about Norway while I was in Herefordshire, but I wasn't actually in Norway. No.
Okay.
No, that was I was in Norway in February. I went to Trondheim to have a mooch around the U-boat bases and stuff, which was fantastic. But that's a whole other story. No, I was in Herefordshire, very close to the SAS and Army training area at Contralas, actually. Every now and again, you see sort of helicopters whizzing by, and you wonder what's going on, and expect to see men in balaclavas at the bottom of the garden and that sort of thing. But fortunately, that didn't happen. So yeah, I'm busy writing book 4 now. I've made a really, really good start at it now. Wow. About 10,000 words in. And this is about the Lofoten Commando raids. So it's actually not RAF, not Bomber Command related this time. It's about the Commando raids in 1941 in the Arctic Lofoten Islands. And it's about not so much the raids themselves, but about the occupation of the islands and about the impact that the raids had on local communities, and about many of the men who came back with the raiders to serve with Norwegian and Allied forces and in the Norwegian Merchant Marine afterwards, and about all the reprisals and what happened to the islanders afterwards. And it's a really, really interesting story that hasn't really been told before, not in the English language anyway. There's books in Norwegian about it, but not really in English. So I'm focusing on 3 particular characters whose stories, again, haven't really been told before. One is a local journalist who lives in the Lofoten Islands. The second is a British commando who eventually goes on to serve with the Z Force in the Pacific, but that's a whole other story as well. I've got access to his diaries, which have never been published before, from his family. And I've also got a German merchant seaman who was captured in the raid and brought back to England as well. And it's all about what happened to him beforehand, because he was in the concentration camps before he joined the Merchant Marine, etc. And so it's a really interesting web of stories that all combine on this particular morning in March 1941. So I'm really, really excited about it, and I'm really, really enjoying writing it. But I've had to learn Norwegian.
Wow,
So
that's
yeah,
impressive.
yeah, yeah. I'm about a year and a half into my Norwegian studies. I can read quite a bit now. My speaking's rubbish, but I can actually read quite a bit now because there's a book that I need to
Brilliant.
read on Company Linga, the
Mm.
Norwegian Commando and SOE unit, which is based out of Scotland, but it's all in Norwegian. It's never been translated. It was published, I think, in the early 1950s, and it's a really beautiful, beautiful book, and the pictures are gorgeous and everything. So I
Mm.
had to basically trying to learn Norwegian so I can read it. I'm getting
Yeah.
quite good now. I can pick up a few bits and pieces, but anyway.
Mm.
So
I need to learn
you're
German.
not.
That would, yeah.
Oh, I tried. It's impossible. I gave up
I'm
after
trying,
about
and
a
it is
year during
impossible.
lockdown. Yeah, I was all right doing the basic
A
stuff, but
similar
once
thing
you
to
get
me.
onto the grammar
Yeah.
and stuff, it's just
No.
Norwegian's
But
actually
just
quite
quickly,
easy.
when you is it?
Yeah, because loads of the words are similar,
Okay.
especially if you come from the northeast of England, because loads of northeastern dialect words
Oh, of course.
have Scandinavian roots. And
Yeah.
so a
But it is
Norwegian
amazing,
person
isn't it?
would
When you
say, a Norwegian person would say,
sorry.
"Jeg går hjem," and a northeast person would say, "I'm going hjem. I'm going home." So yeah, it's
Blimey.
there's so many similarities. I was astounded, but I mean, we speak
That's
a different language in
amazing.
the northeast anyway. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But also, when
That's
I'm
it.
looking at this Norwegian stuff, there is some Bomber Command related stuff because obviously I'm looking at the very beginning of the Norwegian campaign and the absolute fiasco that was the British intervention in Norway in 1940.
Yep.
So at the moment I'm looking at the bomber attacks on the airfields. So there's lots of stuff for Blenheims, Hamdens, all sorts of stuff like that. Attacks on Stavanger and Bodo and obviously up at Narvik and all that sort of thing. Then you've got all the carrier aircraft as well, which is really interesting. So, I mean, the whole thing's just a massive shit show, to be honest, but there's just so much in there. It's great, but it's massively complicated. Yeah. So that's
I remember. I was going to say I remember touching on it in my MA dissertation because obviously I wanted to talk about the build-up, and I really wanted to take a deeper dive on Norway. So the fact you're doing it is definitely I'm all ears for that, especially the early war bombers as well. Yeah.
So I think we should maybe do an episode on the Norwegian campaign and sort of Bomber Command's, the RAF's involvement in that at some stage. I think that would be really good to do. You mentioned briefly that you were away teaching in Cambridge, so tell us all about that.
So this is a summer school. It was 2 courses, Introduction to the Second World War for sort of, I don't know, I think it's 14 to 17-year-olds. So it's given them a taste of uni and such like. And I did it last year. And again, this year, last year I was at Jesus College in Cambridge. This year I was at Peterhouse, which is a beautiful little campus.
Nice.
And this year, because I'd done it last year, I threw in a few more trips. And obviously, Cambridge, you've got to go to Duxford. I went to the US War Cemetery as well, near Madingley. Oh, my goodness. How?
Well, I live at the other end of the country, that's why.
Oh, that's true.
Too far away from everything.
They got nose of a Halifax there that they're working on at the moment.
Yeah, you sent me a picture of that. Yeah.
Masonet's hangar. Yeah. I had to. It's got to be done, hasn't it? It's Halifax related.
Absolutely.
And the first time I went, they didn't have the Blenheim, but the second time they did. And you can imagine my face when I walked in and just, there it is. Airworthy Blenheim. Wow. Went to Bletchley Park as well, which I always find absolutely fascinating. Great place, wandering around. And and the Imperial War Museum, London. So took them through the First World War exhibit, the Second World War, and then we finished on the Holocaust exhibit, and it's the place to go, isn't it, really, when you're in London? Yeah. And then just a couple of sites
as well. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's incredibly moving. And but the chapel there is actually, have you been there?
No. I haven't been anywhere. The other end.
You haven't, have you? I don't know. I think someone's going to correct me on these figures. I think it's about 3,000 to 4,000 graves, and then there's all of the missing that are slightly more. I think it comes to about 9,000 people commemorated. And they've got a visitor centre, which I think is really good. Because they play this video that gives you an overview of, what sort of people are buried there. And of course, it's a lot of US Air Force, Battle of the Atlantic naval personnel. And went through the visitor centre. They went to the absolutely gorgeous chapel that's there, where they've got the wall of Europe and all the different places that were targeted, and also the lines of the convoys. And then we went out to see the graves, and I got them all to just randomly pick somebody and look them up on their phone and do a little 2-minute presentation.
Good
And
idea.
it was incredible. But it is, I mean, whenever I go to sort of these cemeteries, they're always incredibly moving. You see all the crosses, all the white headstones.
I always blub. I can't help it. I did when I went to Omaha. I just cried all the time. But that's just me.
Yeah.
But I should mention
Yeah.
that we are actually doing an episode about US Army Air Force coming up with Abby Whitlock. And we're going to be talking about Masters of the Air and the relationship with the RAF as well. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I think that one's coming up later on in September, I think. So that should be a really, really good discussion. Abby's fantastic.
And the pub scene
I
as
went
well.
to see her. Yeah. The pub scene, definitely. Yeah. I saw Abby give a fantastic talk a couple of years ago at the RAF Museum conference, and it was all about Lord Flashheart and the sort of mythology of the airmen in the First World War. I mean, I love Lord Flashheart, who doesn't? But anyway, we're coming up to go to the RAF Museum conference as well in September. Aren't we? We're both going. What are you speaking on?
So I've kind of fudged the Second World War into the 1980s here. I'm basically going to be talking television productions, A Piece of Cake and A Perfect Hero, and how the 1980s is reflected through those two TV series and then has an imprint on the RAF and also the memory of the Second World War. And also when I talk about some wider context of the 90s, it's kind of like you start getting the commemorations I feel that we're more familiar with now, and you've got Reagan's speech at D-Day and things like this. So it's all bringing in that context and how collective memory kind of evolves. And I think that things like television, film are a good reflection of that, because the producers are watching this, they're picking up what people want to watch, what's going to sell and stuff. So no, it's supposed to be a 1980s conference, but I've kind of gone, I think it's important, I
don't know if you attended Roland White's talk at Warfest, I shouldn't hold that, we have Wesfest, about the Falklands and how that was related.
I didn't know.
In terms of strategy and doctrine, how that was related right back to the Second World War in terms of carrier operations and the air operations, etc. It was really, really interesting. So see that reflection of the night. It was really, really good.
Yeah.
I think they're coming out being released individually, all the talks, aren't they? So you'll be able to have a look at it and catch up, and it's well worth it. He's fantastic, Roland White. Yeah, I've read all these books. It's brilliant. Yeah. I'm coming to the conference as well, but I'm not speaking this time. I'm my award from the RAF for my thesis. It's the RAF's academic award for my master's thesis on Bomber Command mine laying guarding operation. So I'm pretty chuffed about that.
Yeah, it's the first conference I've been to in person, actually. I've spoken at a couple, but they've all been online, And I've given talks individually, but
it was brilliant. Yeah, I've given talks online for the RAF Museum, but it's always a great day and you get to meet some brilliant people. So really, really looking forward to that. Right, shall we move on to our listeners' questions?
Yeah, go on.
Some absolute beauts for you here. So massive thank you to everyone who sent in questions via Instagram, via Twitter, via email, etc. We've got absolutely loads, so we can't get through all of them today, but we're going to try and get through 5. Which might be a bit of an ask, actually. But we'll see how it goes.
We can give it a go. We're going
to give it a try. Yeah, right. Shall I read the first one out?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
So the question 1 comes from Ali CG on Insta. Hi, Ali. Great to see you at the fest. And Ali's question is, how common was it for aircrew at the end of a tour to continue with the same squadron in a leader or similar role rather than be posted away for similar? Was it a general rule that people would be posted away to training schools or OTUs? What do we think about that one?
My understanding is that it was an OTU job most of the time, or certainly, going in a desk role, which is if you manage to survive that long, of course. If you manage to do it.
Well, of course, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
But that's the
cruise the crews that I've looked at. All of them were sent away, and none of them ever came back to their original squadron, which was 10 Squadron. I think it was quite unusual for anyone to either stay or either come back after a while, but I think it was just purely by chance and by what was the operational requirement at the time if someone did return to their original squadron. But generally, they are going to training schools, they're going to the OTUs, the operational training units. Sometimes they are going into transport as well. I've got a couple of my crew members went into sort of transport squadrons. Some, of course, then went back to operational service after a period of about 6 months or so. But I think the chances of surviving a second tour were virtually nil statistically, weren't they? They were absolutely ridiculously low. I know that of the 7 guys in my crew, which is my uncle's crew, only one volunteered for a second tour, and he was killed on his 4th op out. So the rest went to gunnery training, radio training, and transport squadrons. And they all survived.
And some would go abroad, wouldn't they, as well?
Yeah.
So some of the well-known ones, but also selling the war to the Americans and such like that. That would be, so to speak, a thing to do. Or go to Canada to training bases there and just give talks and such
South
like.
Africa as well. I mean, yeah.
South Africa.
There's all sorts of different options. I mean, obviously, quite a few did get called back for second tour, but quite a few didn't. And if you didn't, your chances of surviving the war were much, much higher. Do you want to read question 2 out? This one is from Rick's Bar on Twitter. I think that's Derek, isn't it? Is it Derek?
So the question is, can we do an overview of the different bomber command groups, the locations, makeup and roles? I mean, I feel that this could be a pod in itself, because there are a number of changes, aren't there, and what different aircraft they operate, and there's an evolution. One group, a lot of that becomes the advanced air striking force in the Battle of France, which is the Blenheims and battles. Then when they come back, they're reformed. You get the Polish squadrons there flying Wellingtons, eventually Lancasters, and the 2 group, which I will confess I've got a massive soft spot for, had Blenheims at the start of the war, but then they had Bostons, and kind of merged into the 2nd Tactical Air Force. So there is sort of like, I reckon this could be actually a talk in itself. And 2 group are mainly sort of the north of East Anglia, so Norfolk Way, top of Suffolk and such like. And then,
So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a really detailed overview. So I love this subject, right? Because it appeals to my geeky nature. So I'm going to do a summary explaining who's where and what aircraft there are and what happens to them. Because then there's all the training groups as well, but nobody ever mentions the training groups. So we'll do that, right? So let's start off in September 1939. We've got 29 home-based squadrons in 4 groups, each using twin-engine bombers. So we've got number 2 group, as you've mentioned, using Blenheims, and they are based around about the Norfolk sort of area. We've got 3 group, they're a bit further over. They're based in sort of Cambridgeshire and Huntingdon area. They are flying Wellingtons at that point, but then they're to move on to Lancs. You've got a 4 group, which is in the north, East Riding of Yorkshire, and they initially are flying Armstrong with Whitleys and heavy bomber, and then they move on to mainly Halifaxes, but a few squadrons, I think, to get Lancs as well. Then you've got 5 group, which was Arthur Harris's group originally, based in South Lincolnshire and a bit of Nottinghamshire as well. They are flying Houndens, later Lancasters, but I think they end up with a few Mosquitoes thrown in there as well. Then you've got 1 group, and they are in France initially, aren't they? It's part of the Advanced Air Striking Force, as you've just referred to, and they are using, I think, ferry battles. Is that right? Yeah, we talked about those with Alan Alport a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Yeah. Then after everything goes pear-shaped in the summer of 1940, they would then revert to Bomber Command Control, and they are based in Yorkshire, so sort of south area of Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire. Then later on, we have another group, 6 group, which is the Canadian squadrons, and they are based in North Yorkshire and the very, very south of County Durham at RAF Middleton St George, which is now Teesside Airport, of course. They are flying mainly Halifaxes, but also Lancs. I think there's a statistic that something like 70% of Canadians flew on Halifaxes, which is why that particular aircraft is so loved over in Canada. Yeah. Then, of course, you've got 8 group, your Pathfinder Force. They are Cambridgeshire, I think, and they are doing flying Lancs and, of course, Mosquitoes. And then you've got 100 group, which is bomber support. They're doing all sorts of exciting things, such as electronic radio countermeasures, Judas sorties. They're a very mixed force of all different kinds of aircraft. Then you've got your training groups. Initially, you start with groups 6 and 7, and they eventually morph into 91, 92, and 93 operational training units in about 1942, I think that is. And then you've got 26 group as well, which I think is also involved in training. But you've got various bits hived off at various times, and obviously some get sent to the Middle East, and then after the invasion of Italy and the capture of the Foggia airfields, you've got other bombers based down there in the Mediterranean as well. So it's a constant evolving situation, really, constantly changing, constantly restructuring, which makes it very, very difficult when you are trying to research particular crews or particular squadrons or whatever, because it's a very sort of amorphous structure, if you like. Would you say that that's fair?
Yeah, and the biggest thing is growing all the time. You look at the scale from 39 up until 44, 45. I mean, I don't have the figures on me, but would you say 29 squadrons at the start of the war? Which is nothing really, is it?
126 at the end, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's massive. I mean, it just turns into this massive beast, this massive destructive power, really, doesn't it? It's unrecognisable from 39, but by the time you get to 45. Just think of the money and the resources that is poured into that, and the men, both in terms of aircrew and obviously the support as well, for the ground crews and all the support staff. Just an enormous operation. I think it's something like, is it 500,000, 600,000 people involved all told over the course of the war? So that gives you an idea.
It's incredible.
I mean, in the very, very first episode, we touched on the effort that was required to build all these airfields and all these air bases, and the amount of money and effort and manpower that took. You know, people don't even think about that, but it's just a constant ongoing thing. Then, of course, you've got the arrival of the Americans in sort of 42, the building all of their bases as well. So it's just an enormous enterprise, isn't it? Absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Right, shall
and
we
it says much about the specialist groups as well, you know.
Yeah.
So it says a lot about the fact that this technology is changing so much. You do have a group like 100 Group that are doing all of these things that in 39, I mean, would have almost felt like science fiction to a certain degree.
Yeah. Well, likewise, the Pathfinders, you know, the sort of evolution and all that.
Yeah.
But we're going to have a separate episode devoted to the Pathfinders. Will Iredale, who wrote a great book on the Pathfinder forces, coming in to have a chat with us about that. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, that's a whole other... Yeah, the evolution, it just expands exponentially from 39, doesn't it, really? Absolutely massive. Right. Do you want to read out questions 3 and 4 sort of together, aren't they? Sort of covering the same sort of topic.
Yep. So we've got Joe Welding first from Colorado. I would love to know more about the techniques of how they maintained the adequate separation in the bomber stream and how prevalent were mid-air accidents. Was every aircraft navigating on their own, and did the nominal spacing account for navigational speed errors? And then we've got Nick from Guernsey, who has asked as a supplemental question to Joe's, how was the risk of being hit by another aircraft's bombs managed, and did aircraft get hit by bombs often? Expect possibly different between day and night raids. Love the pod, by the way, Nick. Just want to say, check it out. Do you want to crack on with this?
Yeah. Hi, Joe. Love to see you at Warfest. Likewise, Nick. This is a really great question. So the Americans are flying in tight, close formations, whereas the British are adopting this policy of the bomber stream. So that's basically, you've got all your aircraft heading in the same direction of the same target, but they're not all there getting there at the same time. They'll get there over the space probably usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours or so. And you've probably got around, well, you could have anything from about 500 to 900 aircraft all heading to the same target. So what they do is that each group is given their particular instructions for their squadrons that are taking part in this operation on an evening. But at Bomber Command headquarters in High Wycombe, it's worked out which squadron is going to be taking off at which time and they're all given slightly different heights, slightly different altitudes that they're going to be flying at, so that they don't all basically fly at the same height and end up bumping into each other. At squadron level, individual aircraft are given takeoff times of around about 2 minutes apart to sort of spread them out a little bit. And then the idea is that they all head towards one meeting point and then follow particular coordinates out to the bombing target. And they will then come back by a different route. It's a circular route rather than, you do want to come back on the same route, because obviously the night fighters, whatever, will be waiting for you and just shoot you down. So in theory, it's a great idea. But once you get into the chaos of battle, once you start with some crews developing technical problems which slow them down, or they have to descend to a lower height, you might get some aircraft having to take avoiding action because they are cloned by searchlights or subject to anti-aircraft fire, or they are being chased by night fighters. So it's very, very quick, very easy for that bomber stream or sections of it to descend into chaos, basically, once you're actually over the target. And mid-air accidents do happen. They also happen quite frequently in training, I've noticed as well. Certainly not uncommon, but yeah, they definitely do happen during operations. And with regard to Nick's question, the risk of being hit by another aircraft's bombs, that happened absolutely all the time. It was a very, very frequent problem. Now, obviously, the only way that can be recorded is if another aircraft sees it happening, because if it happens to your aircraft, the chances of you actually surviving that hit are fairly slim. Not so much because the bomb will explode. It's more of a question of a heavy object basically passing through the fuselage of your aircraft, which is going to wreck it basically. And yeah, it used to happen absolutely all the time. Must have been utterly terrifying to see. I think, going back to Masters of the Air, I think on one of the episodes, I think it might be episode 5, when there's that really, really well done sort of depiction of the absolute chaos of a battle. I can't remember what the target is, but it's a really, really good depiction of the absolute chaos of what a bombing raid looks like. And you can see some of those aircraft after being hit by bombs falling from above, from aircraft above, and also from debris from aircraft which have exploded as well. That's obviously another problem. If you are hit on the run out when you've still got a full bomb load, that is going to explode, and there's going to be absolutely nothing left of it, but it's going to be bits of it hurtling through the air, hundreds and hundreds of miles an hour, absolutely lethal projectiles to surrounding aircraft. So the risks and the potentials for danger are absolutely massive. And as I say, it's something which happened with great regularity. Nick asks, could it be avoided? And I think Joe raises that question as well. The answer is, in the heat of battle, probably no. You might be able to avoid it now, obviously, with the technology that we have available. But in those days, absolutely not. You couldn't avoid it. It was just a recognised risk of combat, unfortunately. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just say I completely agree. I mean, the notion of in the heat of combat, and this is another thing. I think I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but just how you had to remain calm as well. And that's one thing that you sometimes see in film and television. I know they got the drama, but they're shouting down the intercom and everything. It's like, that's the last thing you want to do. You're just focusing on the job, speaking calmly to the rear gunner, or the rear gunner saying to the pilot, corkscrew to port, skipper, get on and just do it. Yeah, I think that's something worth emphasising. But yeah, there were incidents of friendly fire. You'd have bombers return and there'd be 3 rounds in the fuselage. Just because, whether deliberately or not, bullets are flying around everywhere. You might be closer than you think.
Well, my uncle,
and I'd say it is in darkness. You don't see a lot.
Yeah. My uncle's crew nearly got shot down on their first raid coming back because the Navy opened up on them as they were coming back over the coast because they were coming in the wrong place because they were so badly damaged. So yeah, I mean, friendly fire happened all the time. I think we could devote another episode just to that, couldn't we? Really?
That's a good shout.
It also reminds me just what you were touching on there about this sort of chaos and all this stuff going on around you. Something that Tom Davidson mentioned in episode 3. Tom was our Halifax flight engineer who we interviewed. If you haven't listened to that episode already, it's well worthwhile. It's an absolutely brilliant episode. And how, I think it was on their first stop, when they saw one of their fellow crews flying next to them, just basically being blown up, and the people falling out of the aircraft and stuff, and how utterly traumatizing that must be. And how do you focus on your task when you see something like that going on? I think I remember Tom telling me that he was physically sick, and they found him sort of somewhere where he shouldn't have been, sitting in the aircraft, and he was absolutely in bits. It took him a real while to put himself together, and the nightmares and stuff that he had after that. And he's 19, 20-year-old at this point. It's their first operation. He go on to do 36, which in itself is incredible.
When I took the students to the Imperial War Museum, they've got the nose of F for Freddy, the Lancaster there, the Australian Lancaster. And I give them a minute and I show them, right, this is where the pilot is, this is, the front gunner and all the rest of it. And then I get them to look at just how thin the aluminium is. And then, oh my goodness. But then there's another bit where you can see the sort of wires that are linked from the control column to the tail fins and ailerons and everything. And I said, this is, remember, this is only 20, 25, whatever years after the First World War. It's still pulling strings. You don't have onboard computers and stuff. It is sheer muscle that is controlling this. And if your controls are shot up or damaged, that's game over, or it's really using all of your brute strength to keep it in the air. And they go, oh my goodness, I never even thought of that. And it's just so worth. I mean, we talk about walking the ground. I mean, it's difficult with the air war, but I think getting up close to these aircraft is certainly one way of doing it. Obviously, we can never really truly experience it, but just see the engineering, get a sense of what it's like in there. And yeah, I always think that's very, very important.
Yeah. Definitely, if you ever get the opportunity to go inside one of these bomber aircraft, I'm thinking particularly Halifax at the Yorkshire Air Museum in particular is a really good example. Do take that opportunity, because I think it gives you a whole different perspective and understanding of what it must have been like. You can never really understand that, but it gives you an idea as to just how terrifying it must have been, because it's so congested and it's such a small space to be moving around in. Right, shall I read out question 5? Question 5 comes from Cy Domingo on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm not calling it X. It's just Twitter forever, as far as I'm concerned.
It's Twitter, yeah.
Yeah. And Simon's question is, did Bomber Command and the RAF in general have NCO pilots throughout the war? I'm sure I've seen crew members who outrank their pilots. Presumably the pilot is in charge in the air. Despite this, that's a really good question, Simon, actually. Yeah.
I love this question.
It's one which causes a lot of confusion. Yeah. Do you want to go first then? Yeah.
Yep. There were plenty of NCO pilots, and they could be outranked by other members of the crew. You could have a flying officer, wireless operator. Ultimately, the pilot is in charge, but also they listen to their tail gunner if they say, do this maneuver, or, another member. That's their job. That's what they're in charge of. And so this is the thing. The bombers that were successful are the ones that did operate as teams, and you could have people from different backgrounds and different ranks, and that would not be a deciding factor. It would be on the person's job. They'd gone through the vigorous training. They'd gone through, that they knew what they were doing, in other words. Yeah.
I find the sort of the social makeup and the class structure of the bomber crew is something that's really, really interesting. Like in the crew that I've looked at, we've got a couple of public school boys, we've got a carpentry apprentice, we've got a butcher's son, and they're all melded together in this particular team. Men who, but for the war, would probably never ever have met, because their social circumstances just wouldn't have allowed it. But one thing you need to bear in mind, that all ranks flew from the very beginning of the war. So you would have lower ranks, you would have NCOs, and you would have commissioned officers. But from 27th of May 1940, I think it was, all aircrew had the rank of sergeant or above. So they were all either NCOs or officers. There was still some sort of, not discrimination, but the feeling that some roles on board the aircraft were more suited to officers than other. For example, it would be very unusual to find an officer who was a wireless operator or a flight engineer initially. And these these roles in particular were less likely to be commissioned as the war wore on. So, for example, a wireless operator, you were lucky if you ever got to the rank of say, warrant officer, but it was very unlikely that you would ever be promoted or, offered a full commission. And it was the same for flight engineers, I think, as well. So it's just that old sort of class bias, I think, as to what is considered to be a trade and what is considered to be a profession. I find that really, really interesting. That's something that I would like to research in much more detail as well.
I find it interesting as well that at the start of the war, you didn't have so much the qualified air gunners. Often they would be just the ground crew that would hop on and be a part of it. And of course, that has to change. You need properly trained air gunners and such. But I just find that incredible.
It's quite scary when you think about it. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone that asked these questions. We've got plenty more as well. Do keep them coming in. We love these questions. Sorry we couldn't answer them all this time, but as I say, we'll aim to cover them in future episodes. So Jane, what have we got coming up on the pod?
We've got some fantastic stuff for you in the next few episodes. We're going to be talking to Daniel Knowles about sort of current academic thinking on Bomber Commando and where the historiography is now, if you like. And then we've got two of our favourite people. We've got Dr. Dan Ellin and Mary Brazier, who are going to be coming on to talk about the RAF's infamous lack of moral fibre policy and psychiatric casualties in their treatment. As I mentioned previously, we've got Abby Whitlock joining us from the US of A, talking about all things Masters of the Air and that infamous pub scene, punch up with the RAF in episode 2. We've got Matt Yates, who's going to be joining us in time for the 80th anniversary of Market Garden to talk about the use of bombers as glider tugs and the glider pilot regiment. I'm really looking forward to that one. Love a bit of Arnhem and Market Garden. And we've got loads more besides.
That's fantastic. What a great array of subjects and episodes we've got. It's so exciting. Really looking forward to this. As ever, please give us a follow on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram. But before we go, we've got a little bit of news. Now, Jane and I are hoping to increase the frequency of our shows to once a week. But to do that, we do need your help. If you can lend your support by becoming a paid subscriber for as little as $3 or around £2.40, just hit the subscribe button on our webpage at nevermindthedambusters.buzzsprout.com, all lowercase, or on the link on the show notes which accompany each episode. This really does help keep the pod going, and it's massively appreciated. We'll be organising some more live streams for our paid subscribers shortly, now that Jane has learned which buttons to press to make that happen.
Keep telling you I'm a lawyer, not an engineer. Anyway, thanks very much for listening, everyone. See you all next time. We've got some brilliant stuff lined up for you. Thank you.